Right, I think we should be good to go. So good morning, everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining us in the webinar today. My name is Jamie Chamberlain. I'm your host for today's webinar. It's really good to have you all here. Thank you ever so much for joining. Today, I am joined by a friend and colleague of mine, Professor Raj, who is the Director of Cybersecurity for City, London University. Absolute pleasure to have you on the call today, Professor Raj. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about the accreditation, Cyber Essentials, what it actually means for organizations, what the accreditation is. It's going to be a live Q&A session, and I would encourage the audience, if you have any questions relating to cybersecurity, please do post them in the chat. And we want to make this as interactive as possible. We want to get you all involved and answer any questions that may be in the back of your mind if you're looking to undertake the accreditation or just find out more about that accreditation, what benefits it can give your organization. So, Professor Raj, if I could hand over to you for a brief introduction, that'd be absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning. As Jamie mentioned, my name is Raj Rajarajan. I'm a professor and also advisor to many SMEs and large organizations in terms of cybersecurity. And one of the passion I have working closely with many accreditation organizations is to help organizations of all sizes and shapes to help with the cyber essentials. So this webinar is very timely. The Mayor's Office in London launched the Cyber Resilience Centre yesterday because the Mayor of London has taken cybersecurity quite seriously, because that's one area that London still seems to be behind many other parts of UK to start with and the rest of the world. And the Cyber Resilience Centre will support through different ways in which the Cyber Essentials process can be moved forward for SMEs so that they are not frightened by the different aspects of Cyber Essentials and how to go forward with the Cyber Essentials.
Fantastic. Thank you, Professor Raj. So, so I have a couple of questions for you today. These questions are often what I get asked in, new business calls that I have when I speak to my clients, and I talk to them about Cyber Essentials. And it's quite shocking to me that a lot of people don't actually know exactly what Cyber Essentials is. I mention it, and the first thing is what is Cyber Essentials? So, from your point of view, Professor Raj, could you give us a kind of an overview of what Cyber Essentials is specifically?
It's a good question, because I've been teaching through a Greater London Authority, GLA, which comes under Mayor's Policing for London, since COVID, for more than 200 plus London SMEs. And 98% of them don't know what Cyber Essentials means. And I just taught the last cohort of 10 companies last Thursday. Apart from one company, they just put a hand up to say they've just done it, but the person who attended didn't have a clue what it meant. So the Cyber Essentials scheme pretty much gives you the basic cyber hygiene. So there are two aspects to the Cyber Essentials. One is the basic Cyber Essentials, which is a self-certification. So there are 5 categories. You can start completing it yourself with the best of your knowledge, and you upload those information onto the ISME portal, which is the government portal. This is a government-backed scheme for companies to show that they actually have controls in place so that they can overcome some of the cybersecurity threats. And if you see the latest report for September alone, that only 2% of cyber fraud has been reported to the UK Crime Agency. And 60% of the national crime for UK comes from cybersecurity, which is kind of astonishing figures. And if you think only 2% is reported, the police cannot really understand how to go around. And this was one of the reasons to link Cyber Essentials as part of the new initiative by the Mayor's Office for Policing, so that people can be encouraged to do the Cyber Essentials, where they start completing the basic assessment to show they take cyber security seriously. And then I still think that's a very basic start where you pay £300 for a company which is less than 9 people, and it varies up to £500 if it goes up to 249 employees or 250 employees, which is the definition of SME. And if you tend to pass that self-assessment first, uh, it gives you a good starting point so that you can then identify your existing vulnerabilities and weak points. But the next stage is to go for Cyber Essential Plus, which means you do an assessment from external and internal through a company which has experience in doing vulnerability analysis, so that you have a report to see where your gaps are and how you need to protect your organizational IT infrastructures. And since I've started teaching the Cyber Essentials to many SMEs in London in the last 2 years, many companies have been asked by their suppliers to show the certification of Cyber Essentials to extend their contract, or to have areas in which they need to win new business. For example, if you want to do a government tender, you'll be asked to have Cyber Essential based on the size of the contract. So it is a certification which gives you a starting point to show to your suppliers, your customers, or your vendors that you take cybersecurity seriously. So that's what, in a nutshell, the Cyber Essential certification scheme is all about.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for that, Professor Raj. And I very much agree with you in the sense of where the police cannot, drill down into the analytics if only 2% of crimes are being reported. There's no data
Yeah.
to really analyze and make strategic decisions on. So, but in terms of the Cyber Essentials, so you've touched on what sort of things we have to go through to achieve the basic accreditation. But can you give us more of an idea of what that actually consists of, the process around getting the basic accreditation and then the plus version afterwards?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned to you in the basic one, there are questions around what's the scope. So there have been some changes in 2022 to the Cyber Essentials. If any of you have looked at the Cyber Essentials, initially there were questions around where does your organization sits, how many officers you want to cover. So you can define your scope. For example, if you have office in London and you want to cover with Cyber Essentials, and you have one in Wales that you don't want it to be covered, you can really define the scope for which you would like the Cyber Essentials covers to be on board. And then it's all about the basic stuff around, do you have good password, do you have a good security policy, do proper patch management, what kind of devices you have, how many. So because of COVID and remote working, they have added a question for this year moving forward: how many remote working employees, what kind of devices they use, and what are the kind of operating systems they have, how regularly you update your apps on your mobile devices of employees, and what kind of patch management strategy you have, and firewalls. And so I think somebody with some level of knowledge can answer many of these questions that are asked in the basic essentials, which is the starting point. But to do the Essential Plus, you obviously need to have an external company, something like Zero probably, to do an internal assessment of the existing open ports and things like that, and external vulnerability scanning, so that you actually can then see from a report, because you need to submit a report. And in the Cyber Essential basic one, that you don't really have an external assessor come to your premises to see what kind of things you have and how you protect your environment. But for the Plus, you have a proper assessment. So you have to have everything in place. So normally, once the reporting is done for the Essential Plus, then you identify all the gaps that you need to, somehow fulfill before you can go through the second stage of assessment. So the Essential Plus is a good one, because that tells you where your weaknesses are. As you know, self-assessment is pretty much like our, now how do we complete our insurance forms? Yes, I have a garage. They ask, do you park your car? We say, yes, I park it in my garage because you get £50 discount because it's protected inside. So we can tell a bit of lies in the essentials because nobody checks everything and come to your place of work to see whether it's everything in place. Whereas the Essential Plus is a proper scan and a proper assessment by an external independent assessor. So it is more rigorous, I would say, and I think that's what all the companies would need to get to, because if you want to get a better discount for your cyber insurance, which many of the companies would need to have, the insurance companies are becoming very careful. The underwriters are asking for this kind of details so that they can minimize the risk when they cost the cyber insurance. So they would like you to partner or use one of the partners of the insurance companies to do a cyber assessment of the infrastructure you have, and then show the Cyber Essential Plus certification. Or in some instances, they allow you to use an external company and then come back and show you got the certification in place so that they can kind of give you the better discount, for example, for your cyber insurance for your organization. Yeah. So there are two things.
Fantastic.
One is very basic, pretty much like how we all get our car insurance. The second one is a bit like the 19-year-old car's black box. You need to be monitored somehow to show that you do take things seriously and you have controls in place, and it's a much more detailed assessment of your organization's cybersecurity controls. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Professor Raj, if you don't mind, we do have a question from a gentleman in the audience, Christopher Haverley. Christopher has asked, what are the Cyber Essentials controls, and do they cover all the critical aspects of cybersecurity and cyber hygiene?
They don't. I think that's one of the problems with somebody asked me that question a few weeks ago, can you map cyber essentials with ISO 27001? So there are two different schemes where one goes through a lot of controls, whereas Cyber Essentials, I think, is the basic level of control that you need to have. As I said, it has 5 areas you go through, 5 categories. So it's a bit like, I think the good starting point about Cyber Essentials is you identify your assets. As I mentioned earlier on, when I taught these 200 plus companies, I asked them, do you know how many laptops and desktops you have, including your remote workforce, and how many mobile devices that move across your office to the home environment seamlessly, and how many enterprise IoT devices you bring into office, like smart printers and IP, whatever IP stuff that you have in terms of portable devices, which are connecting to the enterprise, and then you take it home and then you use it in your work and home environment as well. I think the biggest challenge is to identify these devices and assets you have in the organization. None of the students I taught or CEOs and CTOs I encountered were able to tell me all their devices and assets they have within the environment. I think that's the starting point. And you ask what kind of operating systems do you have, and whether you use Macs, or do you have Android phones, do you have iPhones, do you have Huawei phones? They just don't have a clue, because the problem with SMEs is they tend to have a lot of contractors and external companies, subcontractors. So it's very hard to keep a track. So unless you create a proper asset register, which is, I would say, is the starting point for any organization to start with the Cyber Essential process, that collecting all the assets and then classifying the low, medium, and high risk assets that you have, and then trying to see how you're going to start investing in terms of your high risk assets and how they have to be protected, is kind of the steps you need to start off doing it. So I think the controls are very few, but I think still, if you do the basic hygiene right, and if you start off, then you can go to Cyber Essential Plus, and I think you will get there slowly. And I think to answer that question, I don't think what is in the essentials is, again, for me, a tick box exercise. But the good part of it, at least it makes you to think that I have 40 devices. I only thought I have only 8, and that is an eye opener for many organizations. Jesus Christ, I never thought of all these devices, and now I need to really start patching them up and telling my employees what to do. And I think that's the starting point for that. And also tells you kind of how often do you do patch management. And I was at the mayor's office. The commissioner for London said her laptop crashed yesterday morning. And the IT said, can you just show me how many updates have you done? And she was embarrassed to open a laptop because she hasn't done for the last month any updates on her laptop, and pretty much being in the. So I think these are the good things that Cyber Essential does, is at least it makes you to think that some of these things are like brushing our teeth. We have to do it on a regular basis. If you don't do it, then your laptop shuts down and you cannot stand up in front of 100 audience in a serious meeting to present your work, which could be quite embarrassing. So yeah, and this is where we need to take it seriously.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Christopher, hopefully that answers your question in detail. Thank you ever so much for asking the question as well there. Another question from myself there, Professor Raj, is what sort of benefits, additional to what you've already said, can Cyber Essentials give an organization? Because a lot of SMEs that I speak to, as much as they like the look of Cyber Essentials and what it stands for, they don't really understand the benefit that they can give them.
I think the benefits are twofold. One is I've seen personally helping many organizations with Cyber Essentials. It brings the insurance premiums down, which is a direct benefit you see. One of the other benefits is if you don't have the insurance cover yourself, the Cyber Essentials covers you for up to 25,000 in case you are, be the victim of a cyber attack. So that actually helps you to cover yourself if you're a company with a turnover of limited amount, not a lot of money, but then it covers you. So which is a good starting point for any organization to pay the basic, a Cyber Essential Plus can, go up from £2,000 to £3,000 based on which company you used to get your Cyber Essential Plus done. I think for that you get 25,000 covered by the UK government Cyber Essential scheme. So I think that is a positive thing that you get by default once you get that. The second benefit is it gives your customers and your suppliers confidence. So one of the things is if you don't have that, not many companies would want to talk to you. And that's becoming more and more obvious now. People are asking, if you don't have Cyber Essentials, then go and get it. Because, for example, we work with a lot of financial organizations, and financial technology or fintech is a big area. And if you start talking to major banks, they will tell to all the fintech companies who want to be part of the open banking stack, do you have Cyber Essential Plus? Because we are going to open up our APIs. We cannot take the risk if you don't have Cyber Essential Plus. So, so to do many businesses in the supply chain, because of the vulnerabilities you see in the supply chain, which seems to be next to ransomware today, that many companies are asking when they go to renew the tender or when they go to apply for new contracts, they're asking whether do you have the Cyber Essential Plus. Right? It is slowly become a kind of a default now to have that to do anything. And when I started 2 years ago, it wasn't as bad, but now it's becoming like people are very proud. Yesterday, a lot of companies that was at the City Hall came to me and said, Professor, if you go to my webpage, I have Cyber Essential appearing on the webpage. So they feel that go to my, it's like the verified by Visa. You can trust me. Go to my webpage. Don't worry, I'm Cyber Essential Plus certified. So that kind of confidence. So somebody wants to. So the idea of London police is that if somebody wants to do e-commerce in London, I log into your webpage, I see Cyber Essential Plus. I don't need to worry it's going to be hacked. That's a secondary question whether it happens or not. But at least as a consumer, it gives me the confidence, like verified by Visa. This is a vetting process by the UK government scheme that I can trust this company and I can go. So if I want to book a ticket, I want to find a service for an IT company, or I want to, buy something or book a cinema ticket, and I see Cyber Essentials, then I get the confidence I can share my credit card details confidently. So that gives the consumer confidence when you have Cyber Essential logo on the web page. Yeah.
Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Professor Raj. And we do have a couple more questions from the audience now. So we have a question from Gavin. Do you need to renew Cyber Essentials?
Yeah, every 12 months, unfortunately, because cyber doesn't stay the same. And this is one thing after working for 23 years. You know, I say most of these antivirus companies can't do many things because the new threats evolve very quickly. So unfortunately, if you don't do this on a regular basis, even 12 months, I think is a long time. And this is where, although you might get the certificate, you may have the controls in place, but as I said already, it is like brushing your teeth. Because you brushed yesterday, it doesn't mean you can leave it for 3 more days to brush your teeth. You have to continue to do your hygiene on a regular basis to keep up to date. And I think that's the kind of the 12 months that they expect you to do, is at least it gives them some kind of, it's the same like car insurance. You have 12 months, and after that, things change. So they need to reassess to make sure, what are the different changes that have happened. The company might have grown, they might have new assets being plugged in because it's a company that is growing. They might have moved offices, they might have new employees came in. So I think that's why the continuous assessment is very important. And I think the government has defined a 12-month period for the current essentials scheme. Yeah.
Fantastic. I fully agree with you, Professor Raj. I recommend quarterly reviews for my clients, just that basic cybersecurity check, just to
Yeah.
make sure that you are keeping up to date in all firmware, hardware, etc. So fully agree with you there. Hopefully that answers your question there, Gavin. We do have another question, Professor Raj, from Cornelius. Once you've achieved Cyber Essentials, how long do you have to achieve Cyber Essentials Plus?
You can go straight away to Cyber Essential Plus. As I said, it's just a longer process. You need to wait for the internal and the external assessments to be done. But that's why you need to start with the Cyber Essentials first. If you have everything in place, it takes 1 to 2 days. And if it doesn't, then it just, you have to spend more time in doing it. And I think if they fail you, they give you up to 6 months, something like that, to do it. Otherwise, you lose the money you paid upfront. So there used to be multiple companies, and obviously in the cyber, it's very difficult to have credible multiple partners, and that's why the ISME now taken total control and try to do it themselves. But then they realize with the volume of work that's coming in now, because of the requirements by partners and consumers and vendors, and this is where the Mayor's office now is launching the trusted partner, where Zero will be a trusted partner together with 14 other companies in London, so that they can actually help these companies. And the Mayor has a target of 20,000 SMEs in the next 3 years, which is, what is it, 1% of the London SMEs. So you can see the level of SMEs in London. So his target is to make sure 1% of London SMEs get the cyber essentials within the next 3 years. So it's a huge problem for the government itself. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much. We do have another question coming as well from Vin. Vin is asking, is it really necessary to update the firmware on printers and other devices such as CCTV? And he's also asking, what about smart kettles or fridges?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, an interesting question. I wrote during the lockdown, this was the report I wrote for DCMS, Department of Culture, Media and Sports. That's where cybersecurity comes under. We have enough guidance in terms of consumer IoT devices, but the biggest challenge during lockdown we saw was enterprise IoT devices, including smart kettles, smart locks, smart displays, and IP printers and cameras. So obviously, we saw these were the next big threats that are coming in terms of vulnerabilities that exist. So there's a very good report that NCC Group has done in this space to clearly show the number of threats that have been asked in terms of these devices. So obviously, the government is still trying to come up with a policy in which we can try and come up for an enterprise IoT, because the major concern for the UK government today is, people are seamlessly moving these smart devices across enterprise to the home, as we call the zero trust model. And I think that's the biggest challenge. When you seamlessly move with zero trust, then you need to somehow have automated way of establishing the credentials. And this is where things like continuous authentication and things are coming up, because it's very difficult to define perimeters when you have zero trust devices moving from different environments. So it is uh, so yes, I think these devices will be in scope very soon, but at the moment, I think it's a bit of gray area because the government hasn't defined these devices they need to take care of at the moment. But I think IP printers will come in scope. They have brought cloud into scope. Cloud wasn't so like that. There are new things that come into scope because of the way some of the organizations have to work now using some of these facilities or things that have been used, because after COVID, we all have seamless movement and a lot of working from home, which creates these kind of vulnerabilities, which we haven't seen before. Yeah.
Of course. No, thank you ever so much for that. Hopefully that answers your question there, Vin, and thank you for submitting that question across. We have another question just come through from Gavin again. Gavin is asking, how much does Cyber Essentials Plus cost?
It depends who you go to. So the government scheme says it's around £2,000 to do the Cyber Essential Plus. I've seen some companies charge up to 4,000. Some companies go up to 3,000. Some companies are very kind and do it 2,500. So I think that's one of these challenges with this scheme and the partners you work with. And this is why one reason that the London wants to identify trusted partners to work with the London Cyber Resilience Centre, so that the companies or SMEs who would like to have Cyber Essentials can go to CyberPal, which I call, which means we are the pals for you, so trust us. And so it's going to go through a vetting process to make sure we are the trusted partners for the Cyber Essentials scheme. So you are expecting the partners to be within £2,500. But at the same time, you just bear in mind that it depends how long you have spent time on your existing network and how much you have already invested in doing the current basics. Yeah. So I think these are based, like I did for one law firm, that a lawyer never touched anything for the last 15 years. And it's embarrassing being a lawyer doing a lot of conveyancing, which means a lot of transfer of big sums of money for house purchases. But the hub was full of vulnerabilities, and 99% it failed when I did the test. So obviously he has to update every system, every laptop, every PC, including the hub, and that was quite a costly activity. So I think it depends on, I think this is where it comes to the point where you start building it slowly. It's like building a house. It takes time. You cannot just put the foundation and say, I got a house and I can live. You need to start slowly build it, put the windows, make sure, put the roof, make the insulation right. And then you're saying, I'm comfortable now and I won't have leaks and I won't have loss of heat from the house. So I think it's a bit like that. You need to start with a good foundation and then slowly start building it, and it takes time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Professor Raj.
So
Just to
start with the
follow on.
2,000. That's the ballpark figure. Just around 2,000. Put it aside, and then work your way as you go through the process. Yeah.
Fantastic. Just to follow on from that, as part of my advice, I would always advise to approach your MSP or trusted partner and have that review prior to going for the Cyber Essentials accreditation, just so you've got that baseline understanding of any remediation work that needs to take place before both yourself and your MSP are confident that you will achieve that accreditation there. So
That's
we
a good
have.
point, Jamie. Just to touch upon that, when I discuss with a lot of SMEs in my network, and when I taught, a lot of the SMEs, which are, or the small micro ones, which are normally under 9, but what I find is 3 to 5. What they tend to say is, I got my IT partner, they will do it for me. I got Stripe and they will sort out all my payment. I don't need to worry. But I always tell them, go back and ask them to give you the PCI compliance certificate, get that for you, because end of the day, if anything happens to your organization, you are the one going to report it to ICO, or the Information Commissioner's office. And I'm sure those SMEs, you all pay your £40 or £35 to the ICO, and you need to report. And when you report, you cannot say, oh, Stripe is taking care of me. You will say, I'm from zero and we have been hacked and it's your responsibility to protect your customers' data. And second thing is to ask your IT vendor, if you outsource your organization's IT, for a report to say, can you show me how many vulnerabilities? So you yourself can, a lot of IT companies will not do this for you as a standard practice, but you always ask, do you think my IT is good? Can you generate this report and show me what are the vulnerabilities you have? Because it is part of the IT suppliers you have or the IT outsourcing companies you use to tell you that, yes, you guys have a problem, because it's also good for them, because they have to make sure your organization is protected, because otherwise if something goes wrong, it also puts them in the middle of something to sort out firefight, which they might not be ready. So I think it's kind of a win-win for both sides. So always check from your IT provider, give me this PCI compliance certificate, give me the report time to time, so that I know that I'm doing the right things and my organization is safe against any cyber threats. So
100% agree, Professor Raj. Thank you for that. We do have another question from the audience, from Abdul. He's asking, does cybersecurity have AI, or does it need a person to do the work?
I think AI is good. It can help you in some places, but most of these things, I think today has to be done by a person, because I think there is no fully automated solution that exists today which can do many things. And because so many errors appear, which the AI may not have the knowledge, especially if you take any of the zero-day attacks and some of the new threats that you see in the cyber threat landscape, you may not be able to address those by just using an AI. AI is a buzzword in myself. So as I said, I work from large companies, you name it, to smaller companies. I've seen all kind of different vulnerabilities on major IT companies. And even the super AI cannot detect these ones, because the attacker is always one step ahead of all of what we are trying to block. So sometimes you need the human element to make the intelligent suggestions and decisions, which this is what I said. It's a bit like the driverless cars. You can always have a driverless car, but the driver has to sit to make a decision whether to hit the cow or the dog or the human, and you make a decision. AI cannot always make the quick decisions. How our neurons work much faster because we have more processing we can. And I think AI doesn't have that much data yet. It might change in the next 40 years, 30 years when you have enough knowledge, but at the moment, the landscape changes so fast. So the AI could support you. And a lot of IT companies do some level of AI, but I think still you need the human touch to really make intelligent decisions. Yeah.
I fully agree with you, Professor Raj. And I always say to my clients that artificial intelligence cannot feel as we do. They cannot feel the pain that a human is going through, and react accordingly to emotions. Which I think is a massive important feature, when you're discussing anything business critical like cybersecurity, is to have that emotion intact and understand the pain that client is potentially going through, or that person. I have a question myself, Professor Raj. What is the future importance of achieving Cyber Essential certification at this stage?
I think it's not going to go away. It's going to be a scheme that's been promoted heavily by the UK government. So I think there is no way out for many of the companies in the UK. At some point, they will have to come and have the cyber essential in place if you want to work, and even if you want to start selling things, and if you want to have credit card data collected, if you want to have it is going to become like the insurance to drive a car. So to drive, like 5 years ago we never paid ICO any money, and now ICO by default asks you to pay £40 a year, so that if anything goes wrong, you go and tell them that we had a data breach, and they advise you. So, and similarly, if you want to drive a car, you need to have insurance. Similarly, if you want to start up a company, it'll become part of a requirement for any startup, or to company SaaS, it'll be one of the requirements. You need to have cyber essentials in time to come. So I think it is something everybody have to start thinking, because if you don't start thinking it, there'll be so many new operating systems coming in. We are going to go into metaverse, which means managing the metaverse with everything virtual. There'll be investment happening in the virtual. We'll be buying, selling, playing games in the metaverse going forward. So I think if you don't have this, you will miss the opportunity to do new business. And I think that's why it's important. And at that time, it'll be, you need to protect your AR, VR, your, these virtual reality, augmented reality glasses. You have to protect them. And suddenly you'll jump into this area where there'll be a lot of challenges, and you might not have enough money to then cope with all the new tech that you have to incorporate to move to your next level of your scaling up. So I think it is something that everyone needs to. And I personally have seen people said this crazy professor is just preaching us everything 2 years ago, and then 6 months along the line they come and say we were just not taking your class seriously. Now bloody hell, I can't get this 3 million contract unless you get this cyber essential. Can you help me out? Then the pressure comes in. They come and say, can you put us in touch with one of your collaborators or colleagues to just get us the certificate, because we need the tender within 2 weeks submitted, and I need to get this through. And smaller companies especially are under pressure to bring money in, which means that some cases you just can't get it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks because they haven't done the basics right. So that's where they miss the business. So it's quite critical. You start slowly building it. And initially, even the Cyber Essentials from the UK government, so I'm also part of the Cyber Alliance, Global Cyber Alliance, and US government, Mr. Trump was the president, invested money globally to see how to help SMEs with some tools which help you to just identify your assets. And there are 5 tools which are free tools just to use, so that you know where you are and then go through the process of getting the rest of the things done. So I think there are some free tools to start off with, so that you don't get put off by the 2000 or 500, which some of the companies attending today might find it too expensive. So I think it just kind of getting started is the important thing. And I think this is not going to go away. This is going to live with us for the rest of our lives. That's my take on this. Yeah.
Fantastic. I agree, Professor Raj. Cyber security is only becoming more important as time progresses. So I fully appreciate there. It's going to become even more important in the future. We're going to be soon be coming to a close, but we do have one last question from a gentleman in the audience, Ali. Ali is asking, are you aware of any changes to Cyber Essentials coming in 2023?
I think I shouldn't be disclosing it, but I think with 2022 changes, I was told there won't be many major changes happening in the 2023. It'll be very minimal for next year. So I think the major changes have happened since the January this year. So all the changes that have happened this year. And I was told there won't be many changes happening for 2023. So that's the stand on it, unless there is another review that's happening at the moment, and things do change. So I cannot say, but what I heard from credible sources, there won't be major changes going forward into 2023.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Ali, thank you for your question. Hopefully that answers that for you. One thing I would say as an additional point to that is always be ahead of the curve. If you have any doubt in the infrastructure and the cyber resiliency for that infrastructure, review it. Review it now, and get that confidence in your infrastructure's security is what I would say on that. But I think we'll end the webinar there, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you in the webinar with me, Professor Raj. Your knowledge in cybersecurity is unparalleled. It's amazing what you know in terms of cyber essentials, and thank you for the insights in terms of the accreditation itself and the benefits that it can give SMEs in and around London and the UK. Guys, there is my email address is in the chat there, so if you do have any underlying questions they haven't been answered during this webinar, please fire them across to me. The same goes for anybody who's looking to carry out the Cyber Essentials accreditation. I'd be happy to talk to you about that and kickstart that process with you guys. One final, we do have a very, very quick question come in, and we'll answer this quickly there, Professor Raj, if you may. It's for Pedro. Cyber Essentials is very much UK centric. How can we align businesses with EU and global connections? Which I think is a very important question for any SME that's looking to branch out into foreign territories.
Yeah, very good question. And I think Cyber Essential claim is an international recognized, although it is UK based, they do promote it as international recognized. But this is where the challenge is, because the Cyber Essential still doesn't do a proper, 114 controls you would see on this ISO 27001. So if you want to expand into EU and internationally, then obviously you have to go with a bigger uh, way of looking at the organization's controls, going into the risk assessment in detail. And I think my advice is you do need to go into ISO 27001. And I think maybe changes to 27002, which are quite great recently. And I think that's what my advice would be, to just have that. If you are expanding your business in the EU and globally, you would need to have the 27001 at some point. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, and thank you, Pedro, for your question there. Hopefully, that answered it in detail for you. So, guys, we're coming to a close in the webinar now. I will thank you all who's attended today. There will be a recording available, which my colleague Henri will send out to all attendees after this webinar. But thank you ever so much for attending today. It's been a pleasure presenting to you all. And if anybody does have any additional questions or any thoughts about carrying out the Cyber Essentials certification, please do contact myself. I'll be happy to speak to you in regards to that and to help you go through that process. So thank you ever so much for joining today. And Professor Raj, from all of us, even the audience, thank you ever so much for joining us today. It's been amazing hearing your thoughts around Cyber Essentials and the importance of that. And I'm sure we'd love to get you in another webinar around cybersecurity again.
Thank you. And the last point, I think all of you should sign up for the London Cyber Resilience Center or the Resilience Center in any part of the United Kingdom, because I think that covers you, to give you some advice and blocks, which could be a good starting point. So please do go and sign up to the London Cyber Resilience Center. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Professor Raj. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope you have a fantastic week.